I want to welcome you back to the Manage to Win podcast. Today's episode is sponsored by Habitly, habitly.com, where you can learn better behaviors. So do you have a behavior that's holding you back? Do you have struggles with how you manage time? Do you have struggles with certain types of people and there's conflict? Do you spend too much time in meetings? Do you not achieve goals? All these things are taught on habitly.com. It costs next to nothing, and you get 7 days free to check it out. I encourage you to go to habitly.com, take a look, give it a try. Today's episode is with Aaron Burnett. He's the founder and CEO of Wheelhouse Digital Marketing Group. And these are just good people. I mean, 3 of their values are helpfulness, generosity, and joy. They work with you as people. They treat you as people. You're not just a number to them. And Aaron walks through what he's doing in his company, how small companies like us should go out and do marketing, and maybe what we should be spending or what we should be doing. How do you figure that out? It's a great discussion. Let's dive in because you need to hear what he has to say. Aaron, I noticed in something that your people sent me that you are all about building a thriving values-led business that's fueled by helpfulness, generosity, and joy. In this bullying environment that we have in social media, politics, and even across America, sadly, there are still people like yourself, I believe, and hopefully myself, who are trying to be encouragers out there. And I would love to hear what you're doing and how you're succeeding in connecting with people, and hopefully maybe even converting some that previously were just overcome with negativity or victimness to really embrace an attitude of gratitude and go out there and make their little world a better place.
That's great. So that is very much the intention behind the company. We're a performance-driven digital marketing firm, but really the impetus for the company is that I believe that the purpose of business is to do good in the world. And this is the vehicle that we have to do good in the world. So we provide great service to our clients, but mostly what we're doing is building fantastic relationships and delivering what they need and doing it in a way that hopefully enriches the people who work here and enriches the people with whom we work. You mentioned 3 of our 5 core values, and they're really the 3 that are the most unusual: helpfulness, generosity, and pursuing joy. And helpfulness and generosity really are the engines of our growth. They inform the way that we interact with one another and the way that we engage with clients. And they inform the way that we run the business. When I started the company 12 years ago, it was with the thesis that people are much better than is conventionally held in business. I'd worked in large companies. I started in AT&T Wireless. I was a VP of sales and marketing there. And in that context, there's this professional persona that you're sort of implicitly encouraged to assume when you came to work. In a work context, you assume that work is competitive, combative, and mercenary. And if you're my competitor, I'm seeking advantage over you. You're seeking advantage over me. If you're my client or customer, we're using contracts to protect ourselves from one another. And there's an assumption in that that's implicit and not too subtle that you don't have my best interests at heart, and I don't have your best interests at heart. So we need this piece of paper to make sure that we're not left to our base impulses and we don't do each other harm. And my experience in my personal life was not that. It's very rare for me to run into anybody who I actually think is not a kind or helpful or good person. In my day-to-day life, that's how I behave toward other people when I'm at my best, and that's how other people behave toward me. So Wheelhouse was sort of a bet that if you build business relationships, and in doing so, you assume the best of the people with whom you're working, and you sort of remind them that we're just people and we happen to be the people we are in a business context, that they'll rise to the occasion and you can have a healthier working relationship. So we're helpful even when our helpfulness isn't included in a contract.
Okay, well, wait a minute. Let me interrupt you because I've already got 2 questions, and I'm a big body, small brain type of guy. That's why my brother described me like a dinosaur. So if I don't ask the questions, they'll be gone. So first of all, I want to make a comment that when you talk about competitors and competitiveness, decades ago, I read, I think it was a Harvard Business Review study or something, and it compared two companies in the convenience store industry. It was Wawa, and was it Quick Trip? I think Quick Trip was the other one.
Mhm.
And they had like a turnover rate of 12 to 18%, whereas the industry standard was anywhere from 125% to 300% in a year for employee turnover. And one of the attributes of the study that was very interesting was these two companies doing the same type of business. They were not geographically competitive, and they were friends. The leaders, they were like, hey, you're not my space. I can be friends. And
Right.
yeah, really powerful for each of them, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's certainly been my experience. And it's also, I think, more to the point, my experience that my clients aren't out to take advantage of me and my employees aren't out to take advantage of me. And if you sort of jettison that assumption and you think the best of people, almost without exception, people rise to the occasion. And if you say explicitly, which we do to every new client, listen, we're going to be generous with our time and resources. If you could ask us for help in any area, even if we're not contracted to do the work, we're probably going to do work that you're not going to explicitly pay us for. And that's okay. We'll look out for your best interests, but we're going to rely on you to look out for our best interests. In nearly every instance, people do. We have clients who call us and say, we really need to be paying you. You're doing this other work that we didn't really consider when we set up this agreement. And that is such a better dynamic and a healthier working relationship than us being in the mode of sending change requests or new proposals constantly to clients, which is the conventional mode for an agency.
Yeah, I want to challenge you, though, on this thing where you're saying, think the best of people, by the way, which I do agree with, but I want to challenge it. So what do you do with that person who's, we have a lot of narcissists in our society today. We have a lot of people who are feel they are victims, and I believe it's from generational problems of parents who wanted to do the right thing, didn't know how to do the right thing. They were wounded from their parents. They then went out and tried to instinctively be parents. They even did a little bit worse, or they got involved in drugs or alcohol or something else. And so I think we just have a growing number of people who are responding to that either by becoming subconsciously narcissistic or have this victim mentality. What do you do with that type of person where you want to lift them up? You want to help them see the light, whatever way you want to put it, and believe in them, but they're just difficult.
Yeah. So I'll answer. Are you asking about clients or employees, or you want me to address both? Because we have.
Yeah, you address both. Go ahead.
Okay. So for clients, there's a vetting process that takes place at the beginning of any conversation with a prospective client. And if we get through the initial sniff test a clear indication that this is not going to be a good relationship, we're going to be, what they're really looking for is not a partner. They're looking for a vendor that they can just work to death, or, they just want to issue orders. We're in the business of expertise. And so we give expert advice. If we're engaging with a prospective client and they don't want advice, they just want labor, well, that doesn't work. If we get into a relationship with a client and for whatever reason, things start to go south, we'll do one of two things. We'll have a conversation with the client and say, we'll do what we call telling the kind truth, which is, I'm going to tell you exactly what's going on. I'm going to tell it to you in a way that you can hear and that hopefully doesn't put you on the defense. It just is what it is. And so we'll say and have said, listen, the commitment we make to our employees is we're going to have healthy working relationships for them. We're going to have great client relationships. And we want to have strong partnerships with our clients. That doesn't seem to be what you want. So I think we don't have a fit. And so, we're going to give you 90 days notice to find another agency and we'll help you with transition. And then if they dig in and they ask, well, okay, tell me what's going on. What are the problematic interactions? Then we'll have that conversation. And quite often we can get a pretty serious course correction on the client side. We have had people fundamentally change the way they engage with us and others based on having that conversation that apparently others haven't had with them. Where employees are concerned.
Well, wait a minute. Let me stay with the client for a minute.
Sure.
Is it ever appropriate in that conversation particularly if they're digging in, that you, in a very kind way, respectful way, will say, well, your people are treating my people this way. And yet I'm reading on your website, or I know from your company, these are your values. And that doesn't really align with your values. So that's a struggle for us because we're trying to live out our value, or however you want to word it. Do you ever insert that in as just trying to be helpful, not to be vindictive or anything like that?
Yeah. So we don't typically do that. We reflect on our values and what we're trying to achieve, and the way that what we're experiencing with them isn't working. And the reason we don't go to their values and the fact that they're not living up to them is that really quickly can smack of accusation and cause a defensive response. And then we're not talking anymore. So, sometimes that conversation doesn't result in a change, and we really do exit a relationship. We have done that sometimes when it's a mid six figures engagement, and it's painful to do, but it's also powerful culturally to be willing to make that change based on values. Values, I think, only have power and meaning and impact where money's involved, when it really costs. You're investing or you're forsaking money. And so in those instances where we've done that, it's been powerful.
Yeah. And I think what I've said for many years is you find out what people's values really are when you see how they spend their money.
Yeah.
So if they're willing to give up money, and I love the fact that you do emphasize your values and you don't challenge them on theirs. So I was just kind of curious, but I can totally support that. But I think that, as you say, that's got to be one of the most powerful things for one of your employees. And I don't know whether you have a story about that, where you stood up for them, you had their back, you met with the client that wasn't changed, and then you walked away from a piece of business, and they were just like, wow. Yeah, I'm so glad you did that.
Yeah. There is, I think, probably the most impactful, or the one that was at closest to the origin of the firm that became a part of the story of the company, is less about having employees' backs and more about making an ethical and principled decision, even when we didn't have a contract that required it. And that was this situation in a large healthcare client, and we have a contract with them. It doesn't include a non-compete. We have a prospective client that is offering us a six-figure engagement. But we're worried that there is some competition between the two. It's not complete overlap. It's maybe 10, 15% overlap. So ethically, we went to the existing client and said, here's the opportunity. We don't feel entirely comfortable about this. And given that we don't feel comfortable, we felt like the right thing to do was talk with you. How do you feel about it? And they said, oh no, we understand we don't have a legal right to preclude you from doing this, but we would have to stop working with you if you did this other work. And so, the ethical decision was to disclose to the current client and let them have a say. And then the further ethical and costly decision was to say, okay, we're going to decline this business. And then we're going to help the prospective client find another agency that can do the work and execute the strategy that we've outlined. And my employees at the time were so surprised that we would do that, that it became a compelling part of kind of company lore that spoke to how much we believe in our values.
And talk to me about the generosity part. You find a lot of companies, when they terminate a contract or it's terminated on them, then when it comes to the handoff to the other company that's going to take your place, they don't do a very nice job, or they're not very responsive, that type of thing. Yeah. Talk to me about maybe things you feel that are unique your company does that goes an extra mile in that regard.
Yeah. So I love the model of exceptional hospitality, which is usually applied to fine dining, but I like applying it to what we're doing in an agency context. There's an anticipation of need and a real sincere desire to be attuned to what folks might desire, and just an intense focus on caring. There's a restaurateur who's relatively famous named Danny Meyer, and he's famous for some fine dining restaurants in New York, and he also is the founder of Shake Shack. And he has a notion of writing the last chapter. Something's gone wrong, and you're going to write the last chapter. You get to decide what that last chapter is, no matter what the precipitating event was. And this is a perfect case in point. All right, a client has decided they're going to work with another agent. We get to decide what taste they have in their mouth as they walk away from us.
Oh, yeah.
And the way we decide to behave informs that. And so if we can be generous and as helpful as possible, and we can do so even when we don't like the outcome, then a good thing will happen. It might not be that client, but it will be that we exited with grace and we continue to be helpful and they share that with someone else. There will be something good that comes from that, even if it's just we know we did the right thing and we left the relationship in a good place.
Oh, I totally agree. Totally agree. Now, let me throw a curveball at you. So we're a small company, okay? And so we're peanuts to you when you're working with those large companies. And we might spend couple grand a month, with an SEO firm. So we signed up with an SEO firm a while back, and really liked the leader, and sounded like a great company, great values, all that type of thing. But we're only $2,000 a month, so I know we're peanuts. But we got assigned to one or two young people, and all the stuff that was being done was being outsourced overseas. And it was really kind of like very quick meetings, check off the box. And we did it for 12 months or 18 months. And I'll be candid with you, we got basically nothing.
Right.
So tell me how you work with smaller companies in particular, because I know that we've got a lot of our audience is smaller companies. And are we just stuck in that mode where we have to accept that type of service? Or it is your company or other companies out there where they can maybe zero in a little bit better on what service is being provided or something? Or maybe you just need to realize you can't spend $2,000 a month. You need to spend 5 or 10. What?
Yeah.
Where do you go with that?
Yeah. So I think you start with an orientation and a fixation on business value. And the relationship has to be calibrated on delivery of business value and clarity in that regard. So SEO can be problematic in that there are all sorts of SEO specific metrics that I can throw at you that show we're making progress. You have more top 10 ranked keywords. Your search volume in Search Console is up, all sorts of things. None of that has anything to do with generating leads or revenue. And so
That's right.
we start with ensuring that every engagement that we have, right? We're performance marketers. All of our clients, with the exception of NASA, we've worked with NASA for years and they don't want this. Everybody else wants an e-commerce transaction or lead generation, and they want revenue on the back of lead generation. Yeah. And so all of our engagements are focused on what business value we're going to deliver. And our reporting is focused on what business value we're delivering. And so I think I have a couple of suggestions. One is find a firm that has that same orientation and is going to provide you with reporting and metrics that deliver on business value. And find an agency that wants the engagement as much as you want the engagement. You don't want an agency where you feel like they've done you a favor, where you have the dynamic that you just described. It's an immediate bait and switch. Senior person comes in, has a conversation with you. You think things are great. They disappear. You've got 2 junior folks and the work's being done overseas. I've actually never seen the overseas SEO model work. I know it's, on paper, it's beautiful for an agency owner because the costs are so low and all that sort of thing. I've never seen it turn out well for the clients. So again, 2 simple things: focus on business value, find an agency that does the same, and find an agency that wants the engagement as much as you do.
Yeah. So when you if you're a company, so I work with a lot of companies in the IT services space. They're typically 20, 30 people, sometimes 50 or 100. I'm currently doing something with somebody who's 200, people right now. But they want sales leads, and it's a very competitive space. So, and I don't know how you want to address this, or maybe you need a pundit. But if you were approached by one of those type of companies, what would you advise them they should expect to budget on a monthly basis in a program that's going to generate, warm leads, people who actually have a need that they can speak with, and then they have to compete on their own type of thing?
Yeah. So I'll oversimplify this and I'll say we give 1 or probably 3 responses, right? So the first thing is we do quite a lot of work before we actually sign any sort of agreement with a prospective client. competitive analysis, opportunity analysis. We'll look at analytics and prior advertising campaigns and Search Console and all sorts of things, all of which is focused on two things. What's the competitive landscape and the opportunity for the client, and can we deliver value that makes their investment make sense? And then finally, what kind of investment makes sense? Is this an instance in which there is a relatively green field and the right content strategy over time is actually going to attract leads, and they'll be good leads organically, in which case we might recommend an upfront investment in a really good content strategy and maybe some changes to site architecture and associated promotion, and then nothing ongoing. Just do this, and here's how this is going to turn out for you. Is this a super competitive landscape? And it's pretty mature, well developed, but the client or prospective client has a good value proposition and clear market differentiation, in which case we might look at digital advertising. We can tell them what strategy we recommend and what sort of investment might be required there. And the third option is we might look and say, for whatever reason, your market is too competitive and you're too small and too new. It would take a ton of money for you to actually break in and generate leads via digital advertising, or content. The content marketplace is already well saturated, and you don't have the wherewithal to develop the content strategy and library that would be required. You should pursue alternate tactics that don't include us, and here are some suggestions, but you really shouldn't spend money with us or anyone who looks like us, right? So it's one of those three options. And the reason is that when we start working with a client, we want to develop a long-term relationship. Our average client tenure is about 5.5 years. And so we're not thinking about year one. We actually don't consider ourselves successful in year one. It's, okay, are we renewing and working in year 2 and 3 and 4 and 5? And are we continuing to drive up and to the right in terms of business value delivered?
Yeah. And that's the way these IT service providers work also. Year one's not profitable. And then after that, they're settling in. I am curious, you mentioned that one unconventional approach led to an 800% increase in appointments for a large healthcare organization that you worked with. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously that's, unless they started with a very small number, that's a very impressive statistic. Can you share that story with us? What did they do or what did you do for them? What was so unique that helped that growth happen? And was that number minuscule at first, or was it actually a reasonable number?
It was a pretty decent number. So that performance was driven by the third largest healthcare system in the U.S. They're called Providence St. Joseph Health. And they started with a pretty decent online appointment booking number. The reason that the approach was unconventional, I'll kind of walk through in brief what we did, is we're a digital marketing agency, but the approach that we took had an awful lot to do with custom software development, custom application development, UX design, conversion rate optimization, and reverse engineering user journey. So sort of the gross simplification is that they had a legacy appointment booking system available on their site. It wasn't doing a good job, largely because of the user experience. And as we peel back what was problematic about user experience, and we did that through user research, we identified iteratively significant points of friction. What are the things that are getting in the way of people setting appointments? Oh, well, it turns out it's the fact that when they're actually looking at a clinic or a physician with whom they might want to set an appointment, there's no call to action there. They have to go somewhere else on the website. Okay, let's develop a new appointment booking application. And we actually had to do that in terms of creating new widgets, and let's make that proximate to where people want to set appointments. What's the next point of friction? It actually turns out that the information that's critical to people deciding whether they can see that physician is what's their insurance and does this doctor take it? What are the specific appointment time slots available and what specific location? None of that information was available in the same data warehouse. It was in 3 completely disparate systems. So we built a new data warehouse, 3 new APIs, and an API service to power this appointment booking application. And then we ran a series of conversion rate optimization experiences, to continue to test and refine and change the way that we were presenting appointment booking opportunities. And each of those would have a 45% or 85% increase in appointment bookings until we had changed entirely the way that appointment booking opportunities were presented based on data that was aggregated in a data warehouse we created. And we did it using a conversion rate optimization platform that enabled us to push this to production system-wide without having to ask anything of this organization's engineering staff, which had about an 18-month engineering backlog. So we were able to end around that and drive this performance gain without having to work through that 18-month backlog. And so that kind of unconventional approach to drive business value is what can be very exciting about this kind of work.
Wow. So I'm stuck because I've got a lot of questions, but we probably should be wrapping up pretty soon. I'm curious, how does your company, your digital marketing company, so how do you generate your leads?
A couple of ways, almost entirely through referral. Part of the benefit of the strength of our relationships is that folks tend to tell other folks. And the other is by just talking about who we are mostly and what we do secondarily. So I do, a lot of this podcasting. I speak at conferences. I write a bit. I go out to different events, venues, and just share what we're doing with the clear focus on being as helpful as possible. So and I know how it feels when someone's having a conversation with you, but really they're selling. They're just waiting to tell you about what they do and hoping that you've got an opportunity. And my experience is that feels bad. It feels manipulative. And so I try hard never to do that. I just have a conversation where I'm curious about what someone else is doing and try to find a way that I can be helpful without any expectation that that results in business. And my experience is if you're just sincere in trying to help, that good things happen. They don't necessarily happen in the same sort of mathematically predictable way that they would happen if you had a strong lead generation program and you knew that 100 leads result in 20 conversations and 5 opportunities and one of them close. But they happen in a nicer way from a relationship perspective, and they result in healthier client relationships, I think. And it's the way that I like to build a business.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, that was part of the gist of Pat Lencioni's Getting Naked book.
Yep.
And then there's The Go-Giver, which talks about a similar approach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we send every new employee a stack of books before they even start. And it starts with 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and Getting Naked, and another book called The Art of Possibility, which is not a Lencioni book, but is fantastic. And really, as its thesis says, look, the thing that we like about it is this is all made up. So let's make up rules of a game that we all want to play together and be kind of free and loose and have fun with what we're doing, and not get so staid and rigidly adhere to convention. So let's have this interesting kind of fun experience together. And then as they're with us over time, we send more books that we read together. And The Go-Giver is another of them, and The Ideal Team Player and a bunch of those things. And those things are baked into the way that we train our folks and the way that we operationalize our culture.
And I love the fact you give them the books. How do you follow up on them? How do you discuss them after you give them?
So we've had to change that as we've gone remote, and we went remote and stayed remote. We had 8,000 square feet of office space in Seattle when COVID hit, and it was pretty full, and everyone went remote, and I changed hiring practices, and now I've got a much smaller office and almost nobody here and employees in 16 states. So we had to shift from actually meeting with folks and talking about the books to, all right, now we've got a book club for recently onboarded employees where we actually talk about what we learned and what we thought and what that might mean for the company. And we have another book club that is available to all employees where we read new books that are interesting to us, either in terms of personal development or sometimes just for fun.
Awesome. So when you talk about, I do a lot with hiring, and I've got I don't say this egotistically, but I really believe I've got one of the best hiring systems out there. But you do a lot with hiring for culture fit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious what you think you do that's unique in that approach, because you are all about culture. That's what's driving you. It's very clear.
Right. Absolutely. So first interview is a culture test. That's the screener before we ever get to skills. And then we'll go through skills assessment. Final interview is with me, and it's an hour or so. Also culture fit. I'm still not screening for skill. And we do a couple of things there that make me well informed, better informed, and guide me as to the questions I should ask. Every finalist applicant takes the DISC profile, which is sort of Myers-Briggs applied to the professional workplace.
Yeah.
And then we pair it with something called a saboteur assessment, which kind of plays to the inverse of the DISC profile. So the DISC profile says, these are your personal characteristics, and this is how you're likely to show up in the workplace. And this will be the interplay of your personality type with another personality type. The saboteur assessment says, under stress, this is how your personality is likely to show up. And these are the aspects of your personality that are likely to be problematic. And these are the reasons why, the origin story, the things you're probably telling yourself, and the way you justify this sort of behavior. And we're looking for patterns when we're hiring people for different roles in the company. One thing that we're looking for that you alluded to earlier, so you asked what we do if we encounter someone who has a victim mentality. And I gave you the answer for clients. The answer for prospective employees is we don't hire them. There's only one saboteur profile that we won't hire, and it's somebody who has a strong sense of victimhood. And the way that we learned that is, of course, we had 40 or so employees when we began to employ the saboteur assessment, and we had everyone in the company take it. And we had a couple of folks who had been real problems for a long time and could not make it work and couldn't figure out why. And then we looked at those results. And in one instance, both we and the employee said, oh, this is not good. And agreed, okay, this is a big problem. Things probably need to change, and it probably needs to be the employee. And so we just never hire someone with that disposition.
Yeah, very, very difficult. We actually do what we call talent assessments. They're a combination of the DISC, but then we put in driving forces or motivators. It's the old PIAV, because I find that you need the balance. It's not just what are their behaviors today, but what's driving those behaviors. And we find that that's, if you want to try one for free, I'm happy to send you one just to show you what we do with it. Might give you a couple ideas.
That sounds really valuable.
Yeah.
The other thing that we do that's important is post-hiring, really reinforcing culture and investing in culture. It's the showing part. Nearly everybody who works here has worked in another agency, and most companies talk about values. And you go through the interview process and the values conversation is done, and then you get down to actually doing the work, and it's totally different than anything you heard.
Yeah.
We've tried to operationalize our values and make them real, and we're careful and intentional in investing in those values in the first few months in particular. So reassure folks that this is a true experience here. And we find that it takes most employees about 6 months to relax and decide, oh, okay, this is real. I can have some confidence in this. And often it requires a precipitating event, one of those client situations or an instance in which somebody makes a mistake and it would have been handled in a very different way in another company, but it wasn't here, or we show real care for someone who has a problem. And those things make the culture real.
Yeah. Awesome. So where do people go to learn more about you and your company, Aaron?
They can go to wheelhousedmg.com. They can find me on Twitter. I'm at Aaron Burnett. And they can find me on LinkedIn. Also, LinkedIn, Aaron Burnett.
Fabulous. Thanks so much for being on the show. I could spend all day with you. This is very interesting to me. Love to dive.
I really enjoyed it. Yeah. Thanks very much for the opportunity. It's a great conversation.
Thanks for tuning in today. If you liked the episode with Aaron, hey, how about some feedback? Or send this out to other people so they can listen to this podcast also. It's great stuff. Give us a suggestion, comment, rating. We'd love all that. Don't forget our sponsor, habitly.com, where you can learn the habits of highly successful people. And again, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time. Stay tuned. We've got more great guests coming, but bye for now.